All right, well, welcome to Sports Guys, another edition, and we are doing another episode of our series where we're looking at the history of certain sports, the popularity of those games, the rules of those games, giving you a little bit of footage of what they look like. And today we're going to be covering our favorite sport and America's favorite sport, and that is American football. We're going to get into all the history of it, the rules of it, all the different leagues, the teams, the logos. We're going to look at how the NFL logos have transitioned, how the college football logos have transitioned. We're going to talk about our favorite teams and what we love the most about the sport itself. How you doing, Robbie?
Doing really well. Very excited for this one.
Yeah, I know. This is one that we have been thinking about for a while. It's part of this series of sports we've been doing, and you guys have been seeing some of them. It started with our first episode, which was pickleball. We talked about the history of pickleball, the rules, and the popularity of the game. We used that same format, and we then did rugby, and then we did bocce, and now we're doing American football, and we still have soccer to come. So this will be
And all our strange sports too.
and all the strange sports. So this
Strangely
is
cool
our
sports.
fourth in the series of these history of sports series, and of course we're tackling our favorite sport of all, which is American football. So Robbie, what do you think was the time in your life you actually started to love the game? Do you remember?
Yeah. We lived overseas quite a lot of our lives, which was not a typical way to grow up, but it was certainly the way we knew. And what was so cool was that getting to watch football meant we were back in America. And so it was reconnecting with the US for us. And it was all the things that represented what we had missed when we left. In addition to that, it became my favorite childhood memory, honestly, was Sundays were for watching the Redskins. And we would sit around, mom would cook all day. We would sit around and we would watch all the pregame. We'd watch the Redskins, and dad would make milkshakes at halftime. And then when the game was over, we were in extremely good mood or extremely upset, depending on how the game went. And then we'd sit and watch soccer made in Germany. And it was so fun. But that was the coolest family time that we had. We just sat there for hours as a family unit and just enjoyed the football. And, we're yelling at the TV and cheering, and it was just so fun. But it was all about being together and eating and all that. So it was a lot of memories for me. So that was, when we were 7, 8 years old.
For me, it was the same. I remember all those Sundays were fantastic. They were usually chocolate milkshakes,
Hmm.
but every once in a while, he would also make what some people call a brown cow or a root beer float. So I
Hmm.
remember doing the root beer floats with the A&W root beer with dad. That was fantastic. Mom would make the
Yeah.
little finger foods for us, and
Hmm.
that was so much fun. And then to tack on top of that, I remember going down to the University of Virginia football games with dad and with our grandfather, who was also a University of Virginia graduate and who absolutely loved the university. And he would go crazy at the games. And so, obviously, going to Scott Stadium was so much fun. And then, probably the greatest memory from our childhood was the time that Dad took us to the NFC Championship game
Yep.
between the Redskins and the Cowboys. And Daryl Grant picks off the ball towards the end of the game and rumbles in with about three guys holding on to him, and he rumbles in with them on his back because he was so huge. And that obviously sealed the game. And then the Redskins were going on to the Super Bowl. So that probably solidified for me that very moment when the whole stadium was rocking. You could literally feel it.
That
Never.
was the
It was like
craziest.
an earthquake. It was like an earthquake.
That was the craziest sporting event I've ever witnessed live, because not only was it was cold as anything that day. Not only was the crowd frothing at the mouth out of their minds, but it was pre 9/11. There wasn't a lot of security to the extent that they have today. And I'll never forget, there were little cowboy dolls that had a noose around their neck,
In
and
effigy. Yeah.
they were hanging in effigy, and they were set on fire. You could never have that nowadays. Just from a safety standpoint, it wouldn't be tolerated. But it was such a crazy scene. It felt like you were in the Roman Colosseum, like,
Mhm.
in a
But do you
strange.
remember just how the stands were rumbling the whole
The
game? I mean, everyone
stands
was
were
kicking
rocking
their
up and
feet.
down about 6 inches.
It was
It,
crazy.
it, it was
It
it
was
was
absolutely
insane.
insane. And so I, as a young boy, was solidified as a football fan for life that night.
Yeah, I think we were already committed
On our
to
way. We're on our
how
way.
special Sundays were for our family get-togethers. Like, we were getting together as a group, and we were just enjoying the game. But to go to that game, that was the craziest sporting event I've ever been to.
And just to realize that you're talking about our hated rivals, the Cowboys. So it
Yeah,
had a little extra sauce with it. Because
yeah.
if we had played any team, it would have been exciting, but this was like extra.
It was a juiced rivalry. Redskin fans were sort of on a mission that year, and I remember we used to say, "We want Dallas, we want Dallas," and then at the end of that game, when we were gonna win it, it was about a minute left or something. They turned and started saying, "We want Miami, we want Miami," and they were gonna go
Mhm.
play Miami in the Super Bowl.
Mhm.
It was a very focused fan base. They really wanted that Super
You
Bowl.
can actually see right here is John Riggins in the Super Bowl that next game, and he's
Yeah,
breaking the tackle against Miami. It was one of the most
yeah.
famous plays of all time when Riggins broke that tackle and went the whole way. By the way, that play was on 4th and 1, which I had forgotten about that, but that play was 4th and 1. If he had gotten stopped, that could have been a pretty devastating moment, but not only breaks that tackle, but then goes for the touchdown. So
Mhm.
there's just so many moments I can point to like that solidified me as a fan for life.
Yeah, same.
There are other moments I remember, like that great Chargers-Dolphins game where they had that incredible lateral play. You remember
Mhm.
that lateral play, the hook and ladder?
Yeah.
So, just things like that, like, I remember growing up as a teenager or a youngster, just
Me too,
I
and
love football, like
the Chargers-Dolphins game that just kept scoring back and forth and back and forth, it was overtime. I remember they were carrying, Kellen Winslow off the field, he couldn't even walk, and he wasn't injured, he just was so dehydrated that,
Mhm.
that was just everyone left everything on the field. That was so cool. Just I was so glad that we got to see that at a young age.
And then when we got to college, of course, we beat Clemson for the first time. We were 0-29 against them, finally beat them, and the whole stadium empties into the field. We got to storm the
Yeah,
field, and we
first
carried
time I've
the
been down on a field.
carried the goalpost down to the corner, and, it was just there've been so many little moments like that, but, I think football for most Americans, and really increasingly around the world, is becoming that kind of, gladiator sport. It's the new gladiators is what it is,
Mhm.
and it's the way we connect as Americans. Doesn't matter your political persuasion or where you're from or how rich or poor. In the end, everybody on Sunday, we're all just Americans. We're all enjoying the game.
Yep.
That's the way I look at it. You ready to dive into the history of the game?
Let's go.
Let's go take a look. All right, well, let's take a moment just to recognize our sponsor for this evening, and that's Academy Sports. They've been sponsoring us for a number of episodes now, and we're really happy to have them back on board with the Sports Guys. So, Robbie, tell us about your trips to Academy Sports.
We love Academy Sports around here. We are into every sport these days with the 9-year-old twins. We are always needing equipment. We just jumped 2 sizes up in pants. I'm getting baseball gear, sliding gloves, base sliding gloves. We're always getting new cleats. It's crazy. They have such good selection at Academy Sports, for perfect for families like we are, where we're always adding new equipment, new sports into the fold, and it's great location, amazing service, and just the best selection. Really good prices too. So Academy Sports is very popular in my house.
That's great. Yeah, last 2 times I've been, I got pickleballs, I got workout gear, I got, some other equipment for my pickleball addiction, I guess you could say. They have an incredible selection. They have a whole football section. I know that tonight we're doing our football episode, and they have a whole section of footballs and football equipment and pads and
Yeah.
all the things you can imagine. So definitely, when you guys get a chance, go check out Academy Sports or go to academy.com, which is their website. They can actually ship directly to you. They also provide some athletic gear on Amazon.com as well. So check out your local Academy Sports. You'll be glad you did. We'll see you next time.
See ya.
All right, so this is our American football history, rules, and popularity of the game. This is our episode 57. Some great logos here we got to go through. The first one on the top left there is the NCAA college football official logo. And then just below that is the one now has been used the last 3 years for the college football playoff, which has become so incredibly exciting now that it's a 12-team playoff and has become much more like the NFL or like a semi-pro league. Below that, you have, this was pretty interesting, Robbie, the Kenya Federation of American Football. So you now have American football leagues in 42 countries, including Kenya. I thought that was pretty interesting. The World Football League is the official international organization of American football. So that was pretty cool to see. It's actually headquartered in Germany, which kind of makes sense. It's very popular there. The CFL, of course, the Canadian Football League, has been a long time surviving league and done very well. The International Football Alliance is another group that was put together. Actually, it's in Australia. NFL Europe, which has been operating for a long time as the NFL equivalent in Europe, has 8 teams that are active in it right now. You have there on the top right a bunch of different competitive leagues to the NFL, XFL, USFL, the new XFL, and some other leagues that have tried to kind of be the spring competitive league to the NFL. And then, of course, you have your great NFL brand logos there on the bottom right. So what are your thoughts about all this incredible popularity in America and around the world?
It's a very interesting evolution of attempts to replicate what the NFL does. College football certainly has its own special, unique qualities. And I think it's really hard to replicate what the NFL's done. But a lot of these leagues are trying to grab other market share, other different times of the year, maybe in different countries. And so it's a good idea to go with something that works. You just got to try and figure out a way to package it.
They call the NFL logo the shield, right? And that you have to protect the shield at all costs. And do you agree that it's become probably one of the top 5 brands in the world? I mean, it's so
I think
recognizable.
so. Yeah, I think so.
I mean, they always talk about the shield, and it really is that kind of iconic brand that, really pervades everything. What do you think the Kenya Football League looks like? Would you love to see what that action looks like?
Yeah,
It'd
I have no idea.
be really fun to watch. And also this International Football Alliance in Australia would be really interesting to see what that looks like. But really, really cool to see the popularity of the game really exploding. Let's talk about the history of American football. It traces back to the late 19th century and evolves from a combination of rugby and soccer, with the first game played in 1869 between Rutgers and Princeton. The sport gained popularity on college campuses, which is where it really grew, and then it led to the formation of the National Football League in 1920. So that was about 50 years later. American football, or the version of the sport of football that evolved from rugby and soccer, it differed in that it allowed people to touch, throw, and carry the ball with their hands, which was obviously very different. And it differs from rugby in allowing each side to control the ball in alternating possessions, which, as you know, in rugby, you could possess the ball almost the whole game if you wanted to, or could. The sport, played with 11 on each side, originated in North America, primarily in the U.S., where it's become the country's leading spectator sport. It also developed simultaneously in Canada, where it evolved into a 12-man game, though Canadian football has never achieved the great popularity or status that ice hockey has there. And now American football is the 5th most popular sport, both participation and being watched game, after soccer, golf, bocce, and basketball. So it's now the 5th most popular. So what are your
That's
thoughts
not
about
bad.
the history of American football? Any thoughts on this?
It's a pretty interesting rise from a very modest beginning at a college matchup there. NFL is a booming industry, and it's pretty cool to watch it grow internationally. I remember how exciting it was to be in an American embassy overseas, and we got to watch the Super Bowl on a live satellite broadcast. That was big back in the
Huge.
early mid
Because you
mid
couldn't get games. Apparently now you can go into any French pub on a Sunday and all the games are on.
right,
It's just very
and
normal now.
that's new.
Yeah.
That's a new thing.
Yeah. You can go to any European city now and see any football game you want, that is very new for sure. Do you think that the game is mostly like rugby? I mean, that's the way I look at it, is that it's the most like rugby of any other sport.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, having played rugby, there's so many similarities. There's some pretty stark differences, but focus on the similarities. I mean, there's an imaginary line of scrimmage. There's a lot of the ball handling, the plays where you instead of blocking, you're doing leg driving guys
Mhm,
over.
mhm,
There's a lot of similarities, whether it's extra points, the way you score a touchdown slash try,
mhm.
um, a whole lot
The
of similarities. Yeah,
Yeah, the conversion, all those different
yeah,
things. Yeah. There is no blocking in rugby, but otherwise it
right.
looks very similar if you watch a
There's no
rugby game.
blocking, but there is, rucks, which is like moving and driving. It's almost like the two lines bang into each other. Um,
If you watched a rugby game and you watched a American football game in 1920 when the league was formed, they look very similar. They really
yes,
do.
exactly right. Exactly
And
right.
so to me, it's the most like rugby, a little bit of soccer concepts in there too. But, uh, but
Well,
yeah, that's
I could tell you quite a long list of things that are different, but so I don't wanna sit and make it sound like they're identical. But, if you're looking for common threads, there's a lot of threads that match rugby and football together.
and then the Canadian game, 12 on 12, the field is much bigger. I mean, it's much wider, it's much longer. The end zone is 2.5 times deeper, so you have a much bigger end zone. The, field goal is up at the, goal line rather than at the back of the end zone. So there are some differences, but otherwise, if you watch it, it's played in a very similar way. It also has 3 downs instead of 4 to get a first down. So have you ever watched any Canadian football? Do you
Yeah.
enjoy it?
Yeah, it's been a couple years, but I thought it was good. I thought it was very exciting, actually.
Mhm. Yeah. It's interesting because it's so much wider and the field's so much bigger, it, allows for a lot more returns, like kickoff returns, punt returns.
Yeah.
There's just so much more space in a Canadian football field, so it's interesting. The, 5th most popular sport in the world, where do you think it'll be 20 years from now?
Maybe 4th,
Okay.
3rd or
Uh, it
4th.
it used to be 4th, and basketball passed it in the last 5 years, which is interesting because basketball has gotten so hot in so many
Yeah.
areas of the world that, in terms of participation, basketball has passed it now.
Yeah.
I think it has a chance at 4 or 3 potentially.
Yeah.
I think golf's gonna
It'll top out there.
I believe golf's gonna fall a little, as it gets more and more expensive to play,
Yeah.
um, but we'll see.
American football started out as a cross between early versions of association football or soccer and its more intense cousin rugby in the mid-19th century. Early history of the sport indicates there was no single variety of the game played, as some schools played only soccer, others only played rugby, while others played various combinations of the two with no formalized rules. The first college football was said to be played on November 6, 1869, between Princeton University and Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey, using a modified version of the Football Association's first set of rules, a game that laid the groundwork for modern American football as we know it today. Following the Princeton versus Rutgers match, other Eastern universities and colleges started playing the game using the same rules or making their own versions of them, until in 1873 when the said universities and colleges met with one another to standardize the rules to be used based more on the Football Association's set of regulation. Harvard, however, refused to attend the said meeting and continued to play the game by their own rules, favoring more on the rugby side. As more schools are becoming more drawn to Harvard's style of play, another meeting was deemed necessary to standardize new game guidelines. Thus, the Massasoit Convention took place on November 23, 1876, establishing rules based mostly on Rugby Football Union's code from England. By 1880, the sport underwent another significant development thanks to Walter Camp, who proposed rule changes during the Massasoit Convention, including establishing the line of scrimmage, the snap from center to quarterback, and cutting down the players in the team from 15 to 11. Camp also proposed several significant changes throughout his football career, such as the introduction of the All-American teams, helping in the creation of the National Collegiate Athletic Association, or NCAA, and pushing for making the sport more about speed and skill versus relying on brute and strength alone, a change that helped lessen the number of injuries from the sport that was becoming increasingly brutal. Moving into the 20th century, football started to gain traction amongst the general population, with competitions and games taking place in localized areas. In one of such games, Pittsburgh club, the Allegheny Athletic Association, hired former Yale All-American guard William Pudge Heffelfinger to play for them against the Pittsburgh Athletic Club, making him the first ever professional football player and giving way to the birth of professional football. On September 3, 1895, the first wholly professional game was played between the Latrobe Athletic Association and the Jeannette Athletic Club, with Latrobe's quarterback John Brayler becoming the first player to openly admit to being paid to play football at $10 plus expenses. By 1897, the Latrobe Athletic Association started paying all its team players for the season, making them the first fully professional football team to play a full season. Through the years, professional football had undergone a number of changes in its rules, team plays, and scoring until it got to a point in 1920 where it encountered three major problems. Number 1, dramatically rising player salaries. Number 2, players constantly jumping from one team to another depending on who paid more. And number 3, the use of college players still enrolled in their schools. These problems prompted the formation of the American Professional Football Conference in August 20th of the same year. 1 month later, the league changed its name to American Professional Football Association, adding to its Ohio League team roster teams from Buffalo and Rochester, New York, Hammond from Detroit, and other teams from nearby circuits. By 1922, the organization changed its name for the final time to the National Football League, or NFL. Other rival leagues have emerged since then, but the NFL managed to fend them off for a few more decades until it encountered its most serious competitor in 1960, the American Football League, or AFL. The two leagues pitted against each other heavily for players and fans, but later on considered merging together when the strain of competition proved too much to keep up. As part of the NFL and AFL merger agreement, the champions of the two leagues would engage in a world championship game of pro football until the merger takes effect in 1970. The games would take on the name Super Bowl thanks to the owner of Kansas City Chiefs, Lamar Hunt, who kept using it in reference to the NFL-AFL games in the merger meetings, despite initial opposition within the league itself. American football has continued to evolve through the years, and with it, the growing passion and perseverance of its players and fans, making it the beloved sport it is today.
So looking at the key milestones for the development of the game in American football, we talked about that 1869 first game. 1870s, rugby gains favor over soccer in major Eastern schools, and modern football begins to develop from rugby. 1873, representatives from Yale, Columbia, Princeton, and Rutgers all meet to create a standard set of rules. So you're talking about that's when they really started saying, okay, what is this game? What do we do? What are the rules? In the 1880s, college football becomes immensely popular, particularly on the East Coast, with schools like Yale and Harvard and Princeton all becoming hotbeds for the sport. That's where all the talent was going, was those schools. In 1890, the first Army-Navy football game was played. And of course, we know that that's an American institution now. But 1890, that game was played. And then in 1906, the big one. This is really what made the game different from rugby. The forward pass was legalized. Mm-hmm. And that's really, to me, what makes American football different from everything else, is the forward pass, because it just completely changed the game. In 1920, NFL was founded in Canton, Ohio, which is one reason why the Hall of Fame is there today. Then in 59, the AFL was founded, a different league, like a competitive league. And then 11 years later, the two leagues merged into one to become the NFL. And then in the 1970s, NFL begins to develop different types of rules, serving its need and style of play, and making some significant changes from the college game to make it a little faster and a little more exciting, and to protect the quarterback and things like that. And then in the 80s, they started thinking about head and neck injuries, and started restricting striking and clubbing and hitting the head, that kind of thing. So think about it. It was only 45 years ago they started really trying to protect players. And then in the 2010s, the NFL has continued to evolve with different rule changes and innovations in strategy and technology. That's where you started to get instant replay and things like that.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts about these milestones and kind of where the game has come in 150 years?
It's pretty interesting to think about how far it's come in equipment, technology, technique, all kinds of variations of using the pass becoming an enormous part of the offense. So it's wild to think about all the different over the years, the different evolutions within the game.
Hmm. What do you think the game looked like in the 1880s? I bet it was pretty funny looking
It
compared to
looked
what
a
we're
lot
used
like
to.
rugby.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
they weren't even wearing helmets back then, and then when they did wear helmets, they were these little leather helmets that didn't do very much,
Yeah.
and the ball was, nothing like it is today. It was the balls were not very good, and, the weather was bad, and, it must've been really interesting. Yeah, you're right, it looked a lot more like rugby than it does today,
Mhm.
for sure. So looking at the evolution of all the NFL logos, this has been pretty interesting to look at. Look on the bottom left there at how the NFL logo looked in 1920 when it was founded, and then how it has morphed in the 30s and then the 40s, the 50s, and then all the way up through the one that is today, the Shield, which has only 8 stars in it. It was interesting. Some of the older ones, they were trying to put all the state stars on there, and now they've gone with just the 8 stars. Thoughts about the evolution of that NFL logo?
That's a cool historical view of how it's evolved.
Yeah. Yeah, that first one looks really odd to me.
Yeah.
But,
And the
yeah, I
second
guess
one too.
yeah, and that was kinda strange too. Look at the evolution of some of the logos of the teams. You can see what the Giants used to look like versus today, what the Eagle used to look like. The Buccaneer, of course, you remember that logo from the '80s
Mhm.
when they had the knife in the mouth.
Yeah.
You had the Dolphin logo used to look like that with a little helmet on it.
Yeah.
To now the more sleek version of it. The, Browns had the little, guy looks like a leprechaun with orange clothes on. The, Denver Bronco with the big D. Seattle had a little bit different design. Green Bay was the most interesting one. It had a big GB for Green Bay. The lion, I was really surprised to see this lion. It looks really kind of childish, I guess you could call it.
Mm.
Not sleek at all. And then the Steeler was just a guy, like, working on steel versus what they have today. You remember the old Patriot logo with him snapping the ball?
I remember.
And then, of course, the old, logo from the Oilers who then moved to the Tennessee Titans.
Mhm.
Any of these logo changes surprise you?
Not really. I think all of them evolved in a positive way and got better. I like all the newer logos better than the old ones, with the exception maybe of Buccaneer.
Mhm.
Not that it's worse, it's just I'm not sure it's better, but
Yeah, I agree. The Browns, I'm surprised they haven't done a little bit better than just a brown helmet or an orange helmet.
yeah, I
Um,
agree.
the, Pittsburgh Steeler old logo,
Mhm.
I don't know about that one, and the Lions old logo too. I think that's a
Yeah,
vast improvement.
yeah.
What about your Dolphins? Do you like the old helmet
I
one?
like it. It modernized, I like the new one.
You don't like the old helmet one?
I like it, but I think the new one was an upgrade.
Mhm. Let's look at
Got
some
it
of the
all.
logos in college football. These are some pretty interesting ones on the left there. The most improved logos. You see 4 different evolutions of the Alabama one. The first one was just the elephant, and then A with an elephant, and then an elephant, and then now the current Alabama logo that you're used to. You can
Mhm.
see the Razorback has changed over the years. The Cincinnati Bearcat one used to just be a Bearcat. Clemson was probably the most interesting evolution. It used to just be a tiger, then it was a C, and then it's migrated all the way to the tiger paw. Then you have Duke, who used to be a Blue Devil, and then has become a big D. You have Georgia Tech has changed a lot. You have Iowa. The Kansas one, that Kansas Jayhawk has changed quite a bit. Any thoughts about some of these?
No, it's just pretty cool history.
The most interesting one I thought was the Wisconsin one, what the Badger used to look like, and then up to just the big W. They kind of de-emphasized the Badger a little bit. So some of the old logos really do look funny. Like that first Michigan one. I don't know about that one. Look back at some of the throwback ACC logos and what they used to look like. The Virginia was just the Virginia Cavalier. BC there in the middle. You had Virginia Tech was the whole state of Virginia with just Tech across it. The NC State was the NC State Wolfpack guy walking around, and of course UNC had the Ram. Do you like some of these old logos?
Yeah. Yeah, they're good.
Here's some of the other old Virginia ones.
What's funny is I remember a lot of them like that.
You remember some of these old Virginia Cavalier ones?
Yeah.
I do like the cross swords, though. I think that was a big improvement. Down below here, you got the Carolina morphing, the Michigan State, Arizona State, USC. I kind of like the Trojan there in the middle. I think that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Iowa and then Iowa State. So all those have morphed quite a bit. And then on the SEC side, you see some of the ones there. You see the old Gamecock, the old Georgia Bulldog. I kind of like that old logo. The Florida Gator, etc. So the logos continue to evolve. I think most of the new ones are better, but in some cases, I kind of like the old ones. So kind of fun to look back at football history. So some classic photos here. Up there on the top left, Oilers quarterback George Blanda. He's kind of a legendary guy doing a pitch play. A pitch play, obviously back then, running was much more important. On the bottom left there is a really interesting picture of Jim Thorpe, who a lot of people consider the greatest athlete ever. And he was with the Orang Indians. This is before he actually played in the NFL itself. On the middle there, you got Denver's Austin Gonsolin being tackled after an interception. You can see what the old uniforms used to look like, and the helmets used to have numbers on them. A really old picture there in the bottom center at Cubs Park in Wrigley Field, where the old Bears were playing. You can see how they used to line up. Pretty interesting. The guys were so much smaller back then.
Yeah.
Than what we're used to. And then a great picture there on the bottom right of the Chicago Cardinals making an interception on Eagles pass. You can see the goalposts were so much smaller back then. I thought that was really interesting. It didn't take very much for you to kick it across that goalpost.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts about some of these classic photos?
They're just cool. Jim Thorpe one's neat.
Yeah. I would have loved to see him play. I mean, they just go on and on about his athleticism. He was just different from everybody else.
Yeah.
Played in the Olympics, too. Did a couple different events in the Olympics.
Yeah, he ran with stolen shoes.
Yeah.
Or no, his shoes were stolen, and he ran with ones that he pulled out of the trash can.
That's
that
right.
didn't even fit.
That's absolutely right. I mean, the game you can see here just looks so different from what we're used to back in the old days.
Yeah.
With the little equipment they had and everything. Some more classic photos here. This top left one is Eric Dickerson doing one of his classic leaps. Of course, he had the greatest season ever with a plus 2,100 yards. Bottom left there is Colts Alan Amici carrying the ball at Memorial Stadium. You see the helmets were getting a little more sophisticated. This was in 1955. Walter Payton, one of the greatest running backs of all time, going up and over against the Saints. This is on the bottom center is future U.S. Congressman Jack Kemp. He actually was also a vice presidential candidate. He's making a leaping throw, which is really interesting to see that style and that technique. And then bottom right is Bears George McAfee, who runs for Daylight during the Chicago 73-0 demolition of the Redskins in what was the championship game, the largest beatdown of all time.
Mm-hmm.
They just couldn't tackle the guy. So, any thoughts about these?
He was the precursor to Bo Jackson.
Pretty much.
These are
Goes
cool.
around and for another touchdown and for another touchdown.
I totally remember Walter Payton doing that like so many times.
Is that crazy?
Yeah.
Guy was unbelievable. I'm not sure we appreciated him or Barry Sanders enough.
Oh,
You
I
know,
think we did.
kind of a once in a lifetime running back kind
Yeah.
of deal. So top left here, this is interesting. The first ever perspective that they took from this height. This was actually in the Astrodome, and it was the first time they ever looked at a game from up above. So that's really interesting to see. You can see that that stadium was also used for the Houston Astros. Bottom left, you had the Browns' Marion Motley returning a kick against the New York Yankees. Back then, the Giants were called the Yankees. In the middle center there, Green Bay's Billy Grimes carries the white ball during a kickoff in a night game. It's interesting as they were talking about the article I was reading that the night games were played, but that the lights were so bad that they were basically playing in the dark. And they had to use a white ball because it was so dark. You couldn't see the ball otherwise unless you had it be kind of fluorescent. So I don't know how they got through these really interesting
Oh,
night
that's
games.
changed.
Yeah. Stadiums are the big lights now. Bottom center, Steelers' Jim Finks and Giants' Ellery Williams were battling for the ball and battling against the actual goalposts. Back then, the goalposts were at the goal line, not in the back of the end zone, which is really interesting. Very much like rugby. And then bottom right there, the Browns and the 49ers slog it out in Municipal Stadium in really bad weather. These are the types of games you actually today don't like. You'd rather see everything in a dome and be perfect conditions. But this is really the tradition of football. It came up through these really bad weather games.
But they weren't based on offenses that ran with precision. It was smash mouth.
That's right.
You know, it was all running and it was all, you know, it was all physicality. The team that's more physical is going to win. It wasn't athleticism.
Do you see, though, the old school fan who loves that and longs for that and longs for those kind of old, muddy, snowy days that they loved it? And
Yeah, but when it's 9-6 instead of 47-42,
yeah,
it's just not as.
I don't know. It's a different game. I mean, we have to be honest. It's a different game from what it used to be.
It's like it takes it back, 100 years,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone's running on every play.
That's right. Today, the quarterbacks are so much more athletic, though. That is one big difference. So, Josh Allen would probably love this type of weather.
Yeah, probably.
As he bowls people over. More classic photos here. We got David Tyree, one of the most famous plays ever in the Super Bowl there on the top left. That play helped them go on to get the winning score against the Patriots, the first time Tom Brady had gone down in the Super Bowl. And then another picture there of Tom Brady in the pocket against the Seahawks in the Super Bowl in Glendale, Arizona in 2015. I thought that picture was really interesting because it looks like literally the perfect pocket. I don't think I've ever seen a pocket that perfect.
Yeah.
And then in the middle center there was interesting. It was an interception, and quarterback Doug Flutie had to try to take down Dolphins linebacker Zach Thomas on this fumble play.
Love it.
Kind of tough duty there to try to take him down.
Yeah.
Then an epic picture there in the center of Rams quarterback Kurt Warner in that incredible season that they had. They call it the greatest show on turf, where they scored so many points. And then another classic photo there of Packers quarterback Brett Favre, where he actually fell down on his own, so he wasn't down, and he actually threw the ball for a completion in 2006. Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Remember that David Tyree?
That's for sure.
He was. Remember that David Tyree play?
Oh, yeah. Super Bowl.
Incredible play. If he doesn't make that play, the Patriots win again. So some incredible football plays there. Here's some more here. We have one with Cam Chancellor actually jumping over the line to try to block Graham Gano's field goal attempt in a divisional round game in Seattle. That was 2015. That game, the Panthers actually won and went on to the Super Bowl. The greatest catch a lot of people think of all time there on the bottom left, Giants' Odell Beckham snags a one-handed catch against the Cowboys one of the most astounding one-handed catches ever made. We got a picture there at top center of what may be one day the GOAT, KC quarterback Patrick Mahomes, in his game against the 49ers in 2018. We have a picture of Jim McMahon when he left the Bears and went to the Chargers for a while. You can see him actually trying to elude the tackle of Reggie White, one of the all-time greatest pass rushers of all time. And then finally, I thought this was an incredible picture here on the bottom right of Leroy Selman and his Buccaneers and the absolute smashing they're doing of the Chargers offensive line and their running back. You ever seen a group tackle like that before?
It looks like a scrum.
But that defense was fearsome with Leroy Selman and those guys.
Yeah.
They were a really fearsome team. Thoughts about some of these classic photos?
Just love it. Super physical football back then, most of it. Really fell in love with the sport when it was at this stage.
Do you remember the Dreamsicle uniforms?
Yeah.
Really, really funny. And Reggie White, man, was that guy, the Minister of Defense. Everybody would want a Reggie White on their team.
He was brutal.
Unbelievable. What a
So
player.
physical, strong.
Yeah. Some other great moments here. Andre Reed exults in the end zone after a touchdown against the Jets for the Bills. He was an incredible player. He was really kind of the go-to guy for Jim Kelly for a long time.
Yeah.
Great picture there of J.J. Watt. He was one of the great pass swatters of any defensive lineman, where he knocks down a Joe Flacco pass in 2012. Steelers linebacker, you remember this play in the Super Bowl where he basically intercepted the ball and brought it back 100 yards for an interception touchdown.
Yeah.
In the Super Bowl. And he's lying there so gassed he couldn't even stand up. James Harrison. That was an incredible play. Top right, you got rumbling. Top right, you got the Chiefs, Jerry May pressuring Joe Namath in a game in 1969. It's a really great shot there in the end zone. And then, of course, I think the greatest play ever for a Redskin fan, 37 years ago, John Riggins running through Don McNeil for 43 yards on 4th and 1 to give the Redskins the lead in the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Classic play.
That was the best.
So you remember all these plays or some of them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember a lot of them. The one where Darryl Grant was running right at us.
Yep, that's the Darryl Grant play we talked about earlier, that interception. He was rumbling.
James Harrison, same thing, ran forever for the Steelers. And then Riggins breaking the Dolphins tackle was huge.
That's right. That Darryl Grant play, that's the loudest I've ever heard a stadium before. When that happened.
Me too. You know what's wild about that game is the refs would always come out and tell the crowd to quiet down.
Yeah.
That was the last time I heard that. Refs telling the crowd not to be so loud.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah, these just bring back so many great memories. I can't even tell you. So maybe the Commanders will bring back some of that old glory under the new regime. Hoping so.
Be nice.
So how did football get its name? So football evolved from rugby and soccer, as we said, but they're both called football in the UK. And the name football stuck in the United States when the sport developed its own distinct rules and characteristics. Of course, the European version, you use your foot, which is why they call it football, and you cannot touch with your hands. American football kept the name even though the ball is rarely kicked. An alternative term they use is gridiron in some contexts, particularly in English-speaking countries where other types of football are popular. American football is sometimes referred to as gridiron football. So thoughts about kind of the evolution of football and why we kept the name, why we didn't call it handball or something?
I mean, it's just historical. It's interesting.
I think it just caught on as football back in the 1800s, and they didn't want to change it.
Yeah.
It's kind of the way I look at it. And we do still kick it some. I mean, kicking is a big part of the game still.
Yeah.
I think. Really epic picture there. Barry Sanders, the guy I think is the greatest running back ever, in my opinion. And retired too young, only played 9 seasons, but was absolutely electric every time he touched the ball. He could go. It was really fun to watch, and he was never really on a good team. So
Yeah, he would run 20 yards to lose one. He was so elusive.
He just, the way he could cut and the way he could juke and make people fall down and break your ankles, and it was just crazy. It was so fun to watch. I really would have wondered if he played for a good team, even a top 10 team, if he would have gotten a couple of rings, because he just always played for a dreadful Detroit team every year. It's really kind of sad. I think it was a bit of a waste. But
yeah.
So what are the rules of American football? Let's talk about the rules here. Involves 2 teams of 11 players competing to score more points than the opposing team by advancing the ball down the field and getting into the end zone, with a goal being to score touchdowns and field goals. A touchdown, of course, is 6 points. It's awarded when a player with the ball crosses the opponent's goal line or catches the ball in the end zone. A field goal is 3 points, awarded when a player kicks the ball through the uprights at the back of the end zone. An extra point comes after a touchdown. It would be 1 point by kicking it through the uprights, or 2 points by running the ball into the end zone on a 2-point conversion. Then a safety is 2 points awarded to the defensive team when they tackle the offensive player with the ball in their own end zone. Then there's downs, which the offense basically has 4 attempts or downs to advance the ball at least 10 yards. And then possession, if the offense fails to gain 10 yards after 4 downs, they lose possession of the ball. So some of these last couple concepts here and rules really made it different from rugby. That's really what made it distinct.
For sure.
Yeah. Because some of these first couple rules are really similar to rugby. But then you start talking about safety, and you start talking about downs and the idea of alternating possession, and you only get 4 attempts to get 10 yards. In rugby, you could just possess the ball the whole game. You just keep pitching it back, pitching. So
you could stay where you are all game long.
Pretty much. So these last couple really did make it a distinctive game. Some other rules here: forward pass. Only 1 forward pass is allowed per play. And if the passer must have a part of their body behind or on the line of scrimmage when throwing the ball, or else it's an illegal forward pass. Laterals, just like rugby, they're unlimited. You could lateral backwards as many times as you want. Interceptions, defenders can attempt to catch the ball themselves, which would be an interception, which gives possession of the ball to their team. So basically everything turns over and their offense comes out on the field. A catch, the receiver must have control of the football and get at least 1 foot in the field of play to complete a catch in college and 2 feet in the field of play in the NFL. The field is 100 yards long exactly and 53.3 yards wide. Blocking, offensive players can block opposing defenders to protect the quarterback or create running lanes. So this is another huge difference with rugby. Blocking is actually illegal in rugby. Illegal contact, defenders cannot hold or encircle receivers, and any intentional contact after the ball is thrown is a penalty. So that's a big difference that protects the passing game in the NFL. If you could mug the guy every time, there'd be very few catches in the NFL.
That's how it used to be. You could.
Yeah, I know.
Kind of.
Just like NBA used to be a lot more physical, but they've gotten a lot of that out of it. Tackles are made by bringing the ball carrier down, and certain tackles are illegal, like targeting the head or neck. Any thought about these rules? What makes it distinctive? How you think they've evolved?
I think the evolution has been one of safety overall, and I think it's smart. I think they've seen a lot of children's parents not give them permission to play and live in fear of the injury, and the long-term effects of CTE and getting concussions and stuff. So the rule changes are coinciding with the equipment changes as there's been more and more pressure to have a safe sport.
No doubt. No, I completely agree. And also, they've evolved not just for safety, but they've also evolved to favor the offense. I mean, let's
Yeah,
be quite honest.
true.
They want scoring, they want catches, they want excitement, they want the offense to be clicking. And so, I know defensive coaches have always complained that every year there's new rules that come out that hamstring and restrict the defense from doing things to favor the offense. And that's definitely
Right.
deliberate. The league wants to have excitement and wants to have scoring. So, wouldn't you agree with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's been
Yeah,
a nonstop rule changes towards the offense for about 40 years.
playing defense is really tough. I mean, you can't lead with your head. You can't lead with this. You can't lead with that. You
Can't
can't do.
launch. You can't hit a defenseless receiver.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a lot of different things. You can't hold them on a pass play. You can't interfere. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, there's no question.
can't
And
jump
it's worked.
outside.
It's worked. I mean, you're seeing 49-42 now in
Yeah,
games.
and
So
fewer head injuries.
true. Very true. And the game's just more and more exciting and more popular all the time. So clearly what they've done with the rules has worked.
Yeah.
So the ball in American football, the modern football used in professional and collegiate games is typically made of cowhide leather with a synthetic rubber bladder. The ball is sometimes called a pigskin. The leather panels are held together by laces, which also provide good grip for throwing the ball. The leather panels are also stamped with pebbled or textured surface to enhance grip on the ball. And then you see the evolution of the ball. I tried to put an evolution here in a timeline. The first football is there on the top left, and it had laces, but it essentially was a soccer ball or the size of a volleyball, and it was round.
Mhm.
And what that did was that reflected essentially it was a cross between rugby and soccer, and it was basically they picked up a round ball and just ran with it. So that was the first football back in the 1800s. Pretty wild.
Mhm.
And then you see how it started evolving on the bottom left there. You started seeing more pronounced laces and better leather, more pumped up balls. See some other ones there as you come across the bottom there, what they started looking like as the ball was evolving.
Which stage was it where they had the deflate gate? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, good point. Back then it was Deflategate, but it wasn't on purpose.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then as those, you can see all the really cool balls here on the bottom as it evolved. And then eventually you see there on the mid right what the collegiate ball looks like today and then what the NFL ball looks like today. So that's all these 150 years. That's what the ball now looks like in college and pro. So what are your thoughts about the ball, how it's been constructed, and look at that first ball and then you look at what we
What's
have today?
interesting, the first ones look like rugby ball to me, other than the laces, and then it clearly becomes like thinner,
Mhm.
and the laces are important, and I don't know. It's a
Like some of
logical progression.
like some of those early balls, if you had the forward pass, it'd be really hard to throw that ball, right? I
Right.
think it'd be very difficult to throw some of those models. So
They didn't
clearly,
throw that much though, so
yeah, that's right. It was mostly pitches. So clearly, as the passing game came in, they kept evolving it and evolving it. And now it's very aerodynamic and much easier to throw. So
mhm.
really interesting to look at the evolution of the ball and how far it's come. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So growth of the game in the USA, more than 10 million people play American football annually in the USA. So you got 10 million players. You can see this is something really interesting to me to look at over the years, viewership of
Mhm.
American football versus the World Series, versus the NBA championships, versus the college football championship. And the NFL has just skyrocketed over the years to the point where it's by far the most watched game and the most watched sport. And baseball has fallen off, NBA has fallen off, college football has kind of remained about the same. So, what are your thoughts about this? What are the reasons why all these other great American sports have fallen and the NFL is now king?
Action. I think it puts a more action-oriented product on the field where people are excited and fired up and cheering and talking smack to their rival.
When you look at the World Series, they've gone from 40 million viewers 25 years ago to 12 to 13 million viewers. That's incredible. It's just cratered.
Yeah, baseball's decline was the NFL's gold mine.
And then the NFL's gone from 45 million viewers to 120 million viewers.
Yeah.
And globally, like 500 million. So it's just, it's amazing to watch. You're right. I think some of the other sports' fade has been the NFL's gain, but it's not all of it. It's also.
No, it's not all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also just the sport's gotten more and more and more popular. Every city, it's kind of like they build their whole weekends around it now. Their college team and their pro team.
Yeah.
Yeah. You see, interestingly enough here, average number of viewers of ESPN Monday Night Football has also steadily grown over the years. So people are starting to really build that into their week as well. Hey, I want to watch Monday Night Football.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the growth of the sport in the USA, 10 million annual players. In terms of the annual growth of American football in the global perspective, more than 6 million people are now playing American football annually in the rest of the world. And like I said before, they're playing it in as many as 43 countries now. You can see there what are the interest levels across the globe of people in terms of being interested or somewhat interested. In the USA, it's 38% of people. Mexico, it's 33%. United Arab Emirates, 29%. I was like, what? Canada, 28%. Australia, 15%. Germany, 10%. And UK, 9%. So those are going to be your top countries that are the most interested in the sport. Any surprises there?
No.
For me, UAE is a little surprising.
UAE being that high up, yeah.
I'm not sure why they would like the game that much, but that's interesting.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And then you have the real interesting stat here on households that view American football. Of course, U.S. is way above 55 million households. Germany's at 10 million. UK is at almost 10 million. India actually has a pretty good number. France, Sweden, China, Italy, Poland, and South Korea. So the fact that you have millions and millions of people watching the sport in all of these different countries tells me that it's becoming more and more of a global brand, for sure.
Yes.
Where do you think it's going? Where do you think we'll be 20 years from now in terms of football participation and viewership?
It's just going to steadily keep slowly growing, I think. Nothing dramatic. No big bounces or anything, but
you couldn't really ever have football in the Olympics, right? Because the games are so brutal on your body and you need so much recovery time. You would need like a 10-week tournament or something.
Yeah, it wouldn't be possible.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. I think this is going to keep growing. I think you'll look 10 years out, it'll be 20 million watching, and then you'll look 40 years out, it'll be 100 million watching. I just think this is becoming a sport that's now being watched by people all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
So world competitions, the primary international competitions in American football include the IFAF World Championship, which is a tournament that happens every 4 years, which is also part of the NFL International Series. The IFAF World Championship, purpose of it is a gridiron competition held every 4 years, featuring teams representing a number of member nations in the International Federation of American Football. The United States has won every tournament since their first participation in 2007, after Japan had won it before we participated. The recent tournament in 2015 was played in Canton, Ohio. Pretty interesting. So thoughts about this tournament that's been going on, and then also the flag tournament that they're starting to put on as well.
It's pretty interesting that every 4 years. What?
Isn't it interesting that Japan, every time they put their mind to something, they get good at it?
Yeah, they're competitive in athletic events that you don't always think of them in.
Yeah. Yeah, of course we came in and we beat them, but yeah, it's interesting that they put their mind into something, rugby or whatever it is, and they're going to get good at it. Yeah.
Makes
I
sense.
think it's cool. They're trying to build kind of like a World Cup in a way
Yeah.
for American football. So we'll see where this goes. So flag football is actually in the Olympics in 2028 in LA.
That's wild.
Pretty cool to see. It's going to be men and women. You see a couple pictures there of the women and a couple pictures of the men. The spokesperson for flag football in LA is Jalen Hurts, and he's been seen in a couple of commercials in front of the LA Coliseum where they're going to be actually playing the games. And pretty cool to see that the NFL is totally back to this movement of flag football in the Olympics. There'll actually be medals and everything handed out. This is a sport I do think will be successful in the Olympics
Yeah, I do too.
because you won't have the injuries. It's fun. All sexes can play it. It's going to be pretty athletic. It'll be exciting. There'll be a lot of cool plays. What are your thoughts about this? Is this something you're going to watch?
Yeah, I think it'd be a lot of fun to watch. You'll have a higher level of athlete going into that sport, and it'll be fun to watch a lot of the football concepts being used.
Mm-hmm. You know, some of the ex-retired players are saying they're going to be trying out for the team. I thought that was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, why not?
That's retired from the NFL, but they still want to try to go for gold.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what kind of team we field. So I'm excited about it. Let's go NFL. Let's go flag football.
Mhm.
This is getting bigger among the youth too. I don't know if your boys have tried it yet, but
Yeah, they have. They tried out for flag football, and the coaches were a little rough, so they said, we'll do it when we're bigger.
oh, they said that. Okay,
Yeah.
that's cool.
I said, okay, we already got 3 sports rolling. That's enough.
So, any other theories about why football in general is getting more popular, the popularity of the game, and why do you think flag football especially has caught on with every sex, every demographic, every country? There's like 60 countries participating in it now.
I mean, I think flag football, everyone can rally behind it. Moms, dads, you know, little fear of massive injury,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody can play it, fewer injuries. It's exciting. It's fun. I think there'll be a lot of good coaching available from ex-players, ex-coaches, retired players. You're going to see a lot of them really enjoy kind of going around the world and helping programs get started. Kind of like in our rugby episode, we were talking to a coach who had come to the United States to help rugby get propagated here. I think you'll see the same thing with American football players going to other countries to help put flag football programs together. So that'll be fun to watch.
Mhm.
So the Vince Lombardi Trophy is the award given to the Super Bowl champion football team every year. You can see an amazing picture there of Vince Lombardi. He was the coach of the Packers, being lifted up by his players after they won another championship. It's named after Vince Lombardi, and he was the head coach of those Packers who won the first 2 Super Bowls ever held. And you can see that iconic trophy there on the right. So any thoughts about this trophy? Where do you think it stands compared to some of the other great trophies in sports?
I mean, I think it's one of the best ones. Stanley Cup's better, but only by a little bit.
Yeah, I think Stanley Cup's number 1. We talked about that. I think this is probably 2. Maybe the World Cup trophy. Maybe World Cup trophy is number 2. This might be 3. I think it's in that conversation. The ability to hold it up with one hand, I think, is really cool.
Yeah, it is.
Whereas Stanley Cup and some of the other trophies, they take a couple players to do it. And this trophy is incredibly iconic because some of the great players that have held it up and made it so famous. So I think it's in the top 3 for sure, trophies that you're desiring to get. Well, let's go watch some highlights of some classic American football, and then we'll be right back.
this
Ball is pulled in by Franco Harris.
to this to this.
Made the catch with one hand for the touchdown.
Well, it all started with this, a Hupmobile, because at a Canton, Ohio Hupmobile dealership on September 17th, 1920, owners of existing pro football teams met to form the APFA, the American Professional Football Association. George Halas and other signers likely couldn't have predicted that 2 years later, the APFA would become the National Football League. They were off and running. And so was Red Grange, the first big NFL star, who, in 1925, sprinted from the campus of Illinois to the Bears and the bank, pocketing the then ridiculous sum of $100,000 to thrill huge crowds as the Galloping Ghost.
Red Grange carried the ball 4,013 times for an average of 8.1 yards and scored 531 touchdowns.
To capitalize on its newfound popularity, the NFL created the NFL Championship game in 1933, played between the best teams in each division.
And the World Championship game is underway.
Grange's Bears were a powerhouse, playing in 7 of the first 11 championships against teams like Tim Mara's Giants and the Redskins, led by Slingin' Sammy Baugh, who lived up to his name by throwing the ball all over the gridiron.
Every time he throws the football, completes a pass, gains a yard, scores a touchdown, Baugh sets a world record.
The NFL, like the rest of America, was hit hard by World War II. League rosters were so depleted, merged teams like the Steagles played against whomever was left. But when the soldiers came home, football had gained enough popularity to support a second league, the AAFC, which included teams like the Browns, 49ers, and Colts. Instead of a rivalry between two leagues killing the sport, they merged in 1949.
Touchdown!
Along with his Browns, Coach Paul Brown brought to the NFL innovation and domination. He was the first coach to champion film study, which helped lead to 3 championships in the 50s.
Watch the Browns. Graham still carrying, rolling out. Chasing his number 76.
When the Browns weren't winning, Detroit was, 3 times with quarterback Bobby Lane. Johnny U closed out the decade in style, leading the Colts to an epic come-from-behind victory in sudden death overtime in what's still known as the greatest game ever played.
The game is over. The Baltimore Colts win a historic overtime victory.
The huge demand for football led to the formation of the AFL and teams like the Bills, Broncos, Chargers, Chiefs, Oilers, and Raiders. But back in the NFL, it was all Packers, winning titles in a Cotton Bowl, an Ice Bowl, and in the first 2 Super Bowls.
Final score, Green Bay 35 and Kansas City 10.
Their legendary status secure when the league's championship trophy was named after their head coach, Vince Lombardi. Meanwhile, Jim Brown was rewriting record books until retiring at the ripe old age of 29. In Super Bowl III, Broadway Joe's guarantee of a Jets victory stole the spotlight.
We beat anybody in the world, and I think we're going to win next Sunday.
And when they delivered by upsetting the Colts, fans knew AFL teams weren't bit players anymore. It was 1970 when the NFL and AFL merged. The style of football, ground and pound. The run game was in vogue from the electric company to the new champs, the Dolphins, who ground out 2 titles.
Heading right side, touchdown, Larry Zonka.
And so did Tom Landry's Cowboys. Behind Dwayne the Silent, Tony D, and the defense called Doomsday, these Cowboys and their cheerleaders won themselves a new nickname, America's Team, and a pair of Super Bowls. But the Steelers trumped that with 4 of a kind, dominating the 70s with 2 jacks, a Mean Joe, and a Swan Dive.
What a catch by Lindstrom.
But it wasn't all handoffs during the disco era, as a bearded quarterback and a brilliant coach created a supercharged modern offense called Air Coryell. San Diego might not have won any Lombardis, but they made the Walshes, Gibbs, and Parcells take notice. Walsh's short pass West Coast offense got it done 3 times for San Francisco.
Montana stepped up, throws. Touchdown!
But Parcells set his sights on defusing it and any other wide-open offense, winning himself 2 Super Bowls. Meanwhile, Gibbs left Coryell's coaching staff and landed back on the ground, winning the Redskins 3 titles.
He's gone! He's gone! Touchdown, Washington Redskins!
just like their rivals in Dallas, who, led by a colorful owner, hoisted the Lombardi 3 times in the early 90s. Then God told Reggie White to sign with Green Bay, and he put the fear of God in quarterbacks on the way to the Packers' 3rd Super Bowl. While all that was happening, Jerry Rice rewrote the record books, and the Bills lost 4 Super Bowls, setting records for fan headaches. But not even an ill-timed migraine could stop Terrell Davis and John Elway from picking up 2 titles. Then the Music City Miracle ended up as a mere preview for the greatest show on turf. As the league entered the 2000s, the traditional powerhouses were crumbling in the Tagliabue salary cap and parity era, opening the way for new champions like the Ravens and the Bucks. But it was a backup quarterback partnering with a rumpled genius that would define the start of the era's only real dynasty. And his duels with Peyton Manning were the stuff of legend, though it was the other Manning who would thwart Brady, along with David Tyree, who proved that it pays to be a heady player.
How in the world did he do that?
Meanwhile, Ben Roethlisberger saw to it that Steelers fans had a ring for the thumb and the other hand. Yet, unlike the 20s through the aughts, no team this decade has repeated. Breeze saved the Saints, but got beast-moded in the follow-up. The blazing hot Ravens couldn't recharge with the lights on or off. And the team 1 yard from repeating had their dreams killed at the goal line.
It's a quick throw. And it's good. Intercepted.
The Butler did it. And after Dab and Devon at Super Bowl 50, that brings us up to now. 96 seasons with 97 on the horizon. The NFL has come a long way. Who would have thought a Humpmobile could get you that far?
All right, Robbie, well, final thoughts, man. Tell me what you think about American football, its history, its popularity, its growth, where it's going. What do you think we're going to continue to see? Are we going to see more of the outdoor stadiums? We're going to see everything go to the indoor ones like you want? Are we going to see more flag football and less tackle football? What are some of the trends you're seeing?
I think the trends are away a little bit from throwing every down, a little more balance. I think there's going to continue to be trends towards safety. They're not done there. I think in terms of what football has meant to us over the years, it can't be understated how much it meant family time. We didn't just enjoy the game. We got into the game, but we really looked around the living room and it was family that was enjoying it together. All the memories that the milkshakes and stuff I bring into my boys' life too. So there's that element of it. There's the evolution of the game, the massive explosion of the economic impact and how iconic it is for Americans. And it's kind of like our game where no one else really plays it on that level, as opposed to the World Cup or something where everyone plays it on the high level.
Mm-hmm.
So evolution of the game is bigger dollars, bigger eyeballs. I think they got to be careful, though. There could be a top-out area where there's enough, when they get involved in some of the politics stuff, that their ratings suffer. They got to be careful not to get too full of themselves and think that it'll always just grow and grow and they'll never be held accountable for anything.
Well, there could also be a top-out from the perspective of moms are not letting their kids play it as much. They were trying to get their kids to go in and play soccer and lacrosse and other things that are less, violent and have fewer head injuries is really what most people are worried about.
Yeah,
so,
head injuries, career-ending injuries.
So they have to be careful because the next generation of football players is getting smaller and smaller in some cases. So they're careful about that. But I think that gives flag football a huge opportunity. I mean, I think 20 years from now, you may see flag football as a much bigger sport in terms of participation, that is.
Yeah.
A lot of high schools are already starting to offer it. It's starting to become a varsity sport. And there's leagues establishing all over the place. There's a field 5 miles from my house. Every time I drive by there's 2 or 3 flag football games going on, men and women. And it's getting bigger. So I think they're 2 different sports, but you'll see, the popularity of both continue to grow, I think. And tackle football needs to be careful, like you said, to not top out.
Yeah. I mean, they're doing a great job. They just need to make sure they keep doing a good job. Don't take it for granted. Pick your battles carefully. Keep improving. Keep looking at your weaknesses in terms of product on the field, and expand carefully. Don't just pick a bunch of overseas countries and throw a team over there and then hope. But like run the preseason games and all that stuff so you can see what kind of response you're getting.
Do you think that the escalation of salaries can continue both at the college and pro level? I mean, it's
Not at the pro level.
It's astronomical. The dollars that wide receivers are getting and pass rushers and quarterbacks are going on 65, 70 million now. They're saying that Jaden Daniels may be the first $100 million a year guy sometime in his career. You think that the economics make sense anymore at some point?
I think it's struggling to make sense now, and I think it's not far away from that tipping point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy to see what the kind of money these guys are making. But then I look at the NBA players, and they're making even more. So,
yeah,
with endorsements and everything else. But I'm excited to see where football is going to go. I think that you're going to see more and more emphasis on offense. They want points. They want excitement. They want passing game. But I do think there's a little bit of a going back to the running game again. We've seen that in the past 2 seasons with running the ball being more and more important and showing real success. So I like that it's going back to a balanced offense, which is what we've always preached here on the Sports Guys.
Right.
And then to watch the evolution of flag football and see where it's going. It's going to be really fun to watch that sport and track it as it goes through the Olympics. You got to think the Olympics is going to give it a huge boost.
I would think.
Going to be fun. Well, guys, we really appreciate you joining us tonight in another one of our series where we looked at the history of American football, the rules of it, and the popularity of it. Hopefully you liked it, and please like this video. Subscribe to the channel. We got a lot of great content coming your way, and really happy you joined us tonight, and you've been with us all the way through this incredible ride this past year. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We hope that we were able to summon up some memories for you of what football meant in your lives, and some great games that you enjoyed and that really stick out. We certainly enjoyed thinking about games that we've come across. We love watching it, and we want to make sure that we highlight important sports like this. And you can join us on our journey. Throw a comment out there, like and subscribe if you can. And thank you for joining us. It's been a great time.
We hope that you can see how much Rob and I love the game of football. Sometimes we wonder if we're giving you too much football content, but sometimes we can't help it, especially during football season. There's so many great games, so many great stories. You know, we're going to be continuing to talk about the offseason in the NFL and college, and we have the NFL draft here in about a month. So it's going to be a fun ride going into the next season. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next time on the Sports Guys. Have a good one.
See you. Thanks.